Now, my first question is, we start with the exemplary work of sensitizing the media that largely project of Population First has done. Ms. Dolly Thakore has played a pivotal role in shaping, conceptualizing, curating various programs to gender sensitize the media professionals, whether they are on, in front of camera or behind. And I would like to know from Dolly ji, in what way largely media has made change over the last 3 decades.
Good evening, friends. I really thought I'd have a full house, but I'm so glad to see that there are people who are obviously interested in what I have to say, or what we have to say. And I'm sitting in between two very powerful women. I cannot compete with any of them academically or in the amount of work that they do. Please let me tell you that my interest in social work and in work with the underprivileged began when I was 11 years old. So please, I'm going to delve into history and tell you all about myself, so bear with me. My father was in the Air Force. We were in a village called, in an Air Force station called Chakeri, which was in Kanpur. And it was carved out of 26 villages. And of course, all our servants or attendants that were there were people from these villages. All the men worked, the women didn't. The men were our malis or bearers or cooks, and in those days, and I'm talking about 6 decades ago or 7 decades ago, even more, they were all people who were prejudiced against women, so the women sat at home and the men came to work. And I decided that during the summer holidays, I would go and teach the women. And in those days, you didn't have to teach the women cleanliness or things like that. They had immaculately sparkling bartans because they used to be all of brass. There was no plastic in the world. That is why we were so good and clean. So I used to go in my summer holidays every summer to this the village, which was about maybe a kilometer away from the boundary of the Air Force camp, and only talk to these women. And all I had to teach them was RREE, which even I didn't know. At age 11, you can imagine how much I knew. But it was such a pleasure talking to them, getting to know them, and being with them. That gave me my big push into social work. And then, of course, we were transferred, college was closed. I came to, I always thought that to be a social worker, you had to be very rich. Because the social workers I knew of that time, they all, were people like Tara Ali Beg and Aruna Asif Ali, and they all drove in big long cars, in chauffeur-driven cars, and my father was a small little Air Force officer, nothing else. And I thought that, that was it. Then I came to Bombay, and I went to the opening of the children's complex. I don't know how many of you have seen that. On the way to the airport, there's a place called the Children's Complex. Beautiful building, lovely, designed by Iftikhar Qadri, who was one of our biggest architects at the time. And I was also one of the invitees there. And I went there, and I was standing against a pillar. And because I didn't know anybody, I had just returned from London. I had worked with the BBC for 5 years, and so I had just come back. So I didn't know anybody in Mumbai at the time, Bombay in those days. And so I asked this little lady standing next to me. She came up to my shoulder, and I said, "And what do you do?" She asked me, "What do I do?" And I said, "I'm in the media. Because I was BBC, I broadcast and do commentaries and all that kind of thing." And she turned to me and she said, "I do social work." She said, "Social work? I've always wanted to do social work." And she said, "Are you serious?" And I said, "Yes, of course." And she said, give me a telephone number. But this, I'm talking about 1969, 70, in 70 in fact. And nobody had telephones at home. Unlike today, everyone's got a little mobile in their hands, we had no telephones. So but in my building lived Shyam Benegal. If you've heard of Shyam Benegal, who we just lost last week in fact. So Shyam, I gave that number, and 3 days later, Zuli rang me up and said, her name was Dr. Zuli Nakuda, and she had been just passed out of Tata Institute of Social Welfare, and she said, Social Services, and she said, she rang me up and she said, Dolly, were you serious about social work? And I said, of course I was. She said, I'm going to Lonavala in 2 days' time, would you like to come? So I drove with her to Lonavala, and she told me that when she passed out from TIS, they gave her 12 or 10 children to look after between the ages of 3 and 11 or 12. And she said, and they lived in, if anybody knows Bombay, Usha Kiran, in a tiny little 2-bedroom flat, which there's no space for anybody else. And there were 10 children to look after. She didn't know what to do. So she was relating this to another friend of hers who lived in Khandala. Now, I'm talking about a time when everybody knew everybody. Khandala now is so big, you don't know anyone. But at that time, everyone knew everyone. And so there's a school called Khandala Public School, right opposite where Mrs. Bhave used to stay. And there was a gentleman who used to go for a walk, who was the principal and the owner of the Khandala school. And he turned to her and said, Mrs. Bhave, who are these children I see sleeping in your veranda, bathing here, eating here? And she said, these are children who my friend has been given, and she doesn't know where to take them. So I told her, you can come and put them here for such time as you find a place. He said, I've got 10 acres of land by the Bushi Dam, and it is yours. You know, can you imagine how people have large hearts and are willing to help? It is our hesitation that doesn't make us ask for help. And so we had 10 acres of only barren land, and we took these children there. We put that, they slept on the ground, on the grass and things. There was no grass, there was only mud. And now, I have been associated with social work. I don't do the physical work like all these people do, but I have used all my contacts to contribute and help. At that time, a friend of mine who was a civil engineer, he put me in touch with architects who I took to this place, who designed the place. Now they built one cottage which had a room where you could sleep 4 or 5 people, and then there was a kitchen, but we had no bartans, utensils, we had no fire, we had no bedding, we had no mattresses, no towels, nothing. But I was Dolly Thakore of Bombay. I rang up the Taj and the Oberoi, and I got them to donate all their blankets, quilts, mattresses, and kitchen utensils to the Antar Bharati Balgram. The Antar Bharati Balgram is still there in Lonavala. Anybody driving past can stop there and have a look at it. That is how my involvement with social work started. And my contribution all these years has been mostly contacting people who can contribute, because not everybody can open their purses and we need money. We do need finances to service all this. And that is how my work started with social work. Now, after that, how much time do I have? I can go on and on. Very little. Then, Bobby's sister, who had started Population First, and he started Ladli. He was very interested in doing something for the girl child. And he started the Ladli Girl Child campaign, and he got a lady called Dr. Sharda, who was the program director, very resourceful person, very hardworking, and Bobby asked me if I would come and help. So I got involved. The year was 2007, when the first time I joined Ladli, and I've been involved with Ladli ever since till today. And that's where I met all these lovely ladies. And Ladli, I leave it to Anuja to tell you how we've spread, where we've got, how large we are, what all we've done.
Thank you. Thank you, Dolly. Dolly mentioned about the Ladli initiative, and I'd like to mention here that UNFPA, the organization I represent, has been supporting the Ladli campaign ever since its inception. Why did we decide to work with media and communications? We realized that media and communication play a very, very important role in shaping popular perception and in challenging discriminatory norms. And we got in touch with Population First and said that why don't we initiate a campaign, why don't we start a campaign that can really look at challenging gender stereotypes, one. Two, how is it that it can normalize, gender roles that men and women do that are generally shown on, in media. And third, how is it that we can motivate media and communication persons to use a gender lens in all their narratives? And every time we have discussions with media persons, I say even a small story of a woman crossing a road early in the morning at 4:30 who was run over by a truck can either just be a woman run over by a truck, a story, or you go deep in and analyze why was she crossing the road at 4:30 in the morning, probably to relieve herself, and there was no toilets in the vicinity of where she stayed. So every little story can be viewed from a gender perspective, and that's where we began this entire partnership with Population First, and of course Dolly. We work on 5 broad areas. One is rewarding positive efforts in the media to bring the whole issue of gender equality into public discourse. So this is the institution of awards for gender sensitivity in media and advertising. Over the last 14 editions, we have moved beyond mainstream media to also include films, theatre, books, have I missed out on advertisements, of course. So we've moved beyond that. So one is reward mechanisms. The second is gender media workshops. And it's not just about sensitizing journalists or media persons on gender issues, but it is being able to make them realize their own gender biases and how these get reflected in communication. So that was our second broad area of intervention. Our third area of intervention, which I thought proved to be very, very helpful, was engaging in dialogues with media leaders and regulatory bodies, so that there was a buy-in to ensure that gender-sensitive content finds a place in mainstream media. So that was our third strategy. The fourth strategy, in order to encourage young people, young media persons, we instituted fellowships, and fellowships for writing on gender issues. And the last one was on creating partnerships with media and communication houses so that gender sensitivity can be taken into their offices and as part of their work culture. And we've seen huge changes. There was, and very quickly I'll give you 2 examples. One is the reporting on rape. So we did an analysis of reporting on rape at the time of Nirbhaya and 10 years after, so 2022. And we found that a lot of the stories currently are well researched. They are written from the perspective of the survivor, very, very balanced, researched, written from the perspective of the survivor. There are no single source stories also. So that's again very, very critical. The other thing is how advertisements have changed. Humongous change in advertisements. And I would say those advertisements that actually created gender stereotypes to sell brands are breaking those stereotypes, to promote gender equality. And I can quote the example of Havells, where the man is ready to take on the name of the woman. He says, "Who kyun legi? Main le lunga uska naam. Kya haraj hai?" Or, Tanishq, and I don't have to go into the several advertisements. They have said, we will make gender a core value of our communications. Or several others. We have Mintra, we have Biba, and I just can go on and on. And this is not restricted to women. It goes beyond the binaries. I think I'll stop here.
I think most important work both Dolly and Anuja ji have done is basically interacting with the youth. Currently, what happens that after Nirbhaya, for the first time, women's rights movement realized that we have to focus on youth and young adults. So the Change Maker program of Population First is very important, where they targeted college students, and SNDT has always been at the forefront right from the beginning of their endeavor. We have organized workshops for engendering classroom, making the teachers more gender sensitive and gender responsive. We also collaborated in preparing the training module, which is freely now used, focusing on 4 thematic areas: social construction of gender, how to do gender research, as she said, that with a gender lens, how to do the research. Third one is a gender-based violence, and the fourth one is that of media's role in reshaping the mindset of people. So I think that module has been very, very useful. It is a collaboration of Population First, UNFPA, and SNDT Women's University Teacher Research Center for Women's Studies that has happened. So I think what is the learning of their testimony? Both the experts, they say that the change begins from us. So even our little success stories, they also have a transformative change. We have seen that if we see the whole history of women's movement, also the change happens. The challenging the patriarchal norm or a very sexist practices is done by individual, but then the solidarity comes, campaigning comes, amplification of their voice comes, and then we are able to achieve our target and get so many important systemic and structural changes in the society. Now, my second question is that what are the success stories of Ladli from your point of view, Dolly ji? Yeah.
I started with Ladli when we were just about 10 or 12 people. And people meaning the people that we contacted and who we were interacting with. And it's amazing how we're not just women, but we've got a lot of men involved in the project also. And it's not only so-called society women of South Bombay, but from all over the city. We have, and the kind of dedication that they have, it's amazing what we've done. The reason I started to talk about my childhood and things is that, it is at that age that you can embed this passion for social work, for contributing to others, for doing good for others. I started at such a young age and I'm continuing till now. And I'm now 82 years old, let me tell you. So this is what I want to say, that you, all of you here must be either mothers-to-be or grandmothers. Please start your children to think about these things. And it's amazing what a reaction that would have on them as they go on. The session before this that I was attending was on disability. I did my first play in Bombay. I directed my first play in Bombay for the Spastic Society of India called Adapt Now. And we did a play called The Emperor's New Clothes. And I directed it. And in fact, with me was somebody that perhaps you all have heard of, Dolly Thakore, who is an actor. And so it's amazing how, we've used our talents and we've used our energies to going into areas not just for public acclaim, but to help the underprivileged, to help the people. There is not a day's boredom that I have in my life. There's not a day's boredom that or a day in my life which I haven't enjoyed. And I'm very happy to be who I am today. I don't want to live to be 90, but I'm very happy that I've got the energy to do what I've done up till now. And with people like Anuja and Vibhuti with me, I know that I will continue to go far. So wonderful to have somebody as impassioned as Anuja with art.
I think what has transpired in this whole deliberation is that changes are happening at three levels. One is pressure from below, which the women's movement has created. Indian women are not victims of violence, they are the active agent for change. And currently this is the year where women's rights movement in India is commemorating Golden Jubilee of its existence, and Beijing Platform for Action, which took place in 1995. This is the 30th anniversary. Lot of deliberations, reflections, and our SWOT analysis is happening, and churning is happening in the women's rights movement in our country. Second one is the lateral changes. Those who are in it, whether you are a worker or an employee or a teacher or a professional, they have started asserting their right. I remember joining Women's University in 77. Women would join at one lowest position and they would retire after 30-35 years. They would retire at the lowest position. Now that is not the case. Younger generation of women, they know their rights. They apply within 3 years. They said, I am competent. I deserve promotion. Okay, and that also you get backlash in terms of sexual harassment. That's another issue. But we also have a law for that. Second one is that women, when they joined the university, they were waiting to be married. Only those who were not married, they came for postgraduate studies. Now, you go in the very first day of your class, teacher, the girls are saying, ma'am, arrange, earn and learn program. I have only 4 hours of lecture, no? Remaining time I want to work, I want to save money. First I will have my flat, small little, even 1 room kitchen will do. But only after I have shelter of my own, then only I'll get married, so that nobody can say, I have seen whatever is happening to my mother or my relative or my neighbor. You just, immediately she's thrown out. I don't want that to happen with me. So I think this is the new consciousness. At one level we are reading, if you read just mainstream newspaper, you will get demoralized, you will get dejected and become cynical. But when you see around, interact with your people, interact with your students, you can see a lot of churning is happening in that. So that is a lateral change, I would say. And at the same time, when people like us who do research, documentation, advocacy, teaching and training, it also results into policy changes. Policies are changed, so many GRs are coming. There was a time when an unmarried woman, she applied for a maternity leave, she would be terminated. Okay, now nobody can ask her, you have an adopted child or a produced child? You get it. In this area of Mumbai, in 1972, all educated modern women in their mini and micro, they were going with a stouting slogan, we want husband, we want job. Because the moment a woman announced her marriage or gave a wedding card to the boss would terminate her. That was that. Air hostesses had to compulsorily retire at the age of 35. Now all that is gone. People are using the law. Equal Remuneration Act, ERA is being used. So changes are taking place, and for one thing, whatever gender commitments we are making of gender equality or empowerment or transformative change, it has to be backed by the financial commitment. So economists like us, our universities economists, they took lead in starting gender responsive budgeting and training the planners and policymakers how to use taxpayers' money, which would reduce gender gap in 5 areas of education, health, employment, decision making and combating gender-based violence. So I think this is a very important, because it is not only talking in terms of platitude and in air and abstractions and generalization, concretely what kind of systemic and structural change we need in the lives of women. And this inspiration came from a person like a founder of SNDTWU Women's University, Maharshi Tondo Keshav Garve, who said that education empowers. What is the motto of this university? Educated woman is an infinite source of energy. And I think that is what we have done, and we have connected. This university has always been at the forefront of any effort at the pathway of gender equality. and empowerment. I thank Professor Sujata Man for giving us this opportunity to share our experiences of the women's movement. Thank you very much.